Escape Pod, Episode 633, Lucky Shot, Part 2, by Jerry Lean.
Hello and welcome to Escape Pod, your weekly science fiction podcast. I'm Mur, your host and co-editor. Before we get started, we'd like to remind you that voting for the Hugo Awards is ongoing, as is voting in our very own Flash Fiction contest. You can participate in either or both. Escape Pod is nominated for the Best Semi-Prozine Hugo, and you can download our Hugo sampler packet from our website. As for the Flash Fiction contest, you can read those on our forums. Today we bring you the second and final part of Lucky Shot by Jerry Lean. Previously, we saw our heroes, the human Cirella and the alien Vermayan, Kai, crash landing on a planet during a battle between their races. They slowly find that they both have a similar need, to stay alive, and that cooperation will benefit both of them. Lucky Shot was first published in the Desolate Places anthology, and also appeared in the collection Life Without Crows. Please note, this story mentions suicide. Jerry Lean lives in Northern Virginia and originally hails from Seattle. In addition to being an avid reader and at times sporadic writer, she's passionate about horse racing, tea, whiskey, and art. She has work appearing in Nature, Orson Scott Card's Intergalactic Medicine Show, Daily Science Fiction, Grievous Angel, Grimdark, and others. She's edited several anthologies for independent presses, is finishing an urban fantasy novel, and is a member of SIFWA and HWA. See more at jerrylean.com. Your narrator is Alethea Contis. Alethea is a princess, author, fairy godmother, and geek. Her best-selling books of Aeroland fairy tale series won 2 Gillette Burgess Children's Book Awards and was twice nominated for the Andre Norton Award. She has 2 new releases on Audible. For Angels to Fly is an urban fantasy short story, and Diary of a Mad Scientist Garden Gnome is a graphic novel narrated by Sketch McQuinner. She lives and writes on the space coast of Florida with her teddy bear, Charlie. You can find her on her YouTube channel, all the social media, and her website. Now get nestled in tight and think about who your real friends are, because it's story time.
The fire crackles, and Cirella watches as Kai lies with his eyes closed, pretending to sleep. She knows he's pretending because his breathing is too soft. She's heard his almost snores since the second night when they'd both finally relaxed enough to sleep. She heard them and registered the strange, soft noises, realized they came from him and not from someone or something trying to sneak up on them in the dark of night, before falling back to sleep. Kai? The word is a whisper. She isn't sure what she wants to say to him, just that she should say something. His breathing stutters, but he doesn't open his eyes. I'm sorry. She looks away from him. She is sorry, but she doesn't know who the people he lost were. She doesn't know if they were innocents or not. She doesn't know why they died, only that someone from her side killed them. She wishes he hadn't lost people he loved, but he would have died if her shot hadn't flown so damn wide. And then what? Would some other Vermayan have sat with some other person from one of the nations that make up the Reverian Confederation and drawn out in strangely colored sand how Vrendon Kai was killed? Vrendon Kai would have killed her if his shot hadn't also gone wide. They're in the middle of a war. Killing is part of that. She can't feel bad about it. She mustn't feel bad about it. She feels bad about it. Cirella. Kai has turned over and is staring at her, and she wonders how long he has been watching her. I've lost people too, you know. Her tone is as abrasive as the sand-laden wind. He frowns. He doesn't understand her, and she won't act it out for him. She's tired of this, tired of drawing in the sand or playing charades. She wants to talk, wants to laugh at a joke or cry at a sad story. One she understands in words, not one drawn in the sand by her enemy. She rubs her eyes, forcing the tears back. She doesn't want to weep over his tragedy, or because she's stuck here with him, Or because she missed such a damn easy shot? Why didn't she check for interference? Why didn't he? Why are they alive when no one else is? He sits up and stares at her, and his dark eyes seem even blacker in the night. She can see the fire reflected in them. He adds more wood to the fire, and the flames flare up, in his eyes and between them. "Good," he says, using her word and trying a small smile on her. She wonders if he understands what she was conveying with the word, or is he just seeking to reconnect with her, with the only other living thing on this awful world? "Good," she says, trying to smile too, but she can feel the expression is forced. She doesn't want to be here with him. Somehow the fire is making it worse instead of better. It reminds her of all the things she's lost, is bringing up memories that raising wind and green dust could never evoke. She can see the fire in her brother Carl's large oven, the one he uses to make bread every morning for his restaurant. She wonders if he thinks she's dead, if Confederation officials informed him of the tragedy out in the wasteland. Maybe he's grieving and making bread in his fiery oven for some post-funeral meal. She can see flames flaring in a fire pit on the vacation world of Skaloth. She imagines her and Justina's friend Morin crouching down by the pit, warming his hands as he stares out at the sea. He'll cry for them. He's sensitive and soft, and she loves him for that. He opposed the war and begged them not to go, to stay on Skaloth with him, and let the ship go on without them. Justina laughed at him. She loved the ship too much. Cirella was tempted to stay on Skaloth, but she knew that Justina would always be first in Morin's heart. He might take Cirella as second best, but would she want to be that for him? Not that she loved him, or at least not that way, but she didn't want to be anyone's consolation prize. Right now, being a consolation prize on that beautiful soft world with that beautiful soft boy sounds wonderful. "Cirella." Kai's rust skin looks bronze and hard and alien in the firelight, and she looks away. She doesn't want grizzled bronze. She wants soft yellow skin like her own. She wants Morin's or Kyle's or anyone but Kai's. She turns away, more to stop the flow of hurtful words she can feel welling up in her than because she cannot face him. She can taste the bitter things that are fighting for release into the air between them, things she'll never be able to take back, even if he understands nothing she says. He'll understand the tone. He'll understand the look on her face. He'll understand hatred, anger, and loneliness. Sheer, wrenching loneliness caused by his beautiful roaring fire. She holds her hand out to the flames, closer and closer, and then in them. The fire burns, and she clenches her teeth to stop a cry of pain from escaping. She'll feel this instead of all the other things she's afraid to feel. Kai grabs her wrist, pulling her hand out of the flames. Her skin is red, but wasn't in the heat long enough to burn badly. "Basla." His eyes are confused and worried. She doesn't need a translation for this. "Why?" he asks her, and she has no answer other than she's a coward and a failure and his enemy. He touches her hand gently, looking at her quizzically as if checking her reaction. She hisses as he hits the part of her palm that took the brunt of the heat, and he pulls his fingers away. Shaking his head, he lets her hand go, but she notices he's watching her carefully, as if to make sure she won't do it again. Studying her palm, she touches the red area until he frowns at the way she's poking at it. He says the thing he said to her when she was scratching the insect bites. His voice holds impatience, but also worry. She holds her hands to his, palms facing him. "It hurts," she says, as if that's a good thing. As if it will be a focus now, one that can take the pain and anger and fear that might have come out of her in cruel and cutting words and transmute the bad things into something good, something the two of them can use to survive. She feels stronger. The pain makes her feel stronger. He holds up his left hand, lays the back of it against her palm, his burn against hers. His skin is cooler than hers, and it feels good against the raw flesh. She looks at him and feels tears begin again, Reaching out with his other hand, he tries to wipe her tears away, but she shakes her head. His hand stops, midway to her. Don't. She's holding herself together with only the pain from the flames. His touch, if it's gentle and sweet and forgiving, will undo her, will send her into some place she doesn't want to explore. He drops his hand. I'm sorry, she says, pulling her hand away from his. He doesn't say anything, just looks away and puts more wood on the fire. She lies down, staring into the fire until the flickering of the flames puts her into some other state, and she can finally look at him again. He's sitting up, watching her as she rests, watching over her. The gentleness of his expression threatens to destroy the control that pain gives her, so she stares back at the flames until she can finally close her eyes and go to sleep. Sorella wakes and stretches, immediately regretting the move as her back threatens to cramp. The sun burns down brightly, pushing away the coldness of night, making it difficult to feel the sadness that overwhelmed her in the dark. Her hand throbs where she burned it, but she holds on to that pain, for it's the feel of survival, the pain of getting on with life. Her skin may burn, but it's no hotter than the sun beating down on her, than the winds that blow, as always. Sorella. She turns. Kai is there, holding several of the succulent's leaves. She didn't realize he wasn't in the camp and wonders how long he's been gone. He says something long and complicated, his face concerned. She thinks it's a lecture on keeping her spirits up, a lecture he's giving her because she hasn't reached for a leaf. She takes one of them from him, squeezing the juice onto her hand. The relief is immediate, the scorched feeling replaced with wonderful numbness. She wonders where loneliness and bitterness are located, wishes she could pour the juice on them, too. Kai turns away, grabbing her water container and the spare. He already has his looped over his shoulder. She notices his water is half gone. He looks at her curiously, as if unsure whether she will want to accompany him after not going the day before. Nodding, she motions for him to walk on. She keeps up with him this time, her ankle no longer hurting as much as it did. Her arm still throbs when she forgets herself and turns it the wrong way. She keeps the sling on just to remind herself not to overdo. The winds whip even more strongly, and she turns to look back the way they came. Their tracks are already blown away in a frenzy of small green cyclones. She's glad they know the way back by heart. Kai sighs and rubs at his eyes, which are red and watering. He's more sensitive to the gritty winds than she is. He'll rinse his eyes when they get to the watering hole, and for a few minutes, while he kneels low to the ground and rests his eyes, he'll be at peace. But as soon as they start back, his eyes will begin to water again. She's seen it happen for 5 days now. She watches him as he walks, judging whether his knee is hurting him. He's walking fine, and she thinks his knee is better, that his injury inside it was much more mild than the cut on top of it. He seems to sense her eyes on him and glances over. Rubbing at his eyes again, he makes a face. She tells him to stop it in his language. She's heard that word enough to learn it, and he smiles. Patting her knee, she points to his, hand turned up, as she shrugs to ask him how it is. He nods. His smile grows. It's fine. It's good. She motions to her side, points at his. He makes a face, dismissing her concern. She decides if he had internal injuries, they'd know it by now. She can tell by his walk that he feels good, that his body is strong and not hurting. But she can also see tiredness in the way his eyes seem to be extra sensitive to the blowing grit, in the way he yawns repeatedly as they walk. How long did he keep watch over her? He looks at her again, another question in his expression. She points to him, making their sign for sleep. He rolls his eyes, a gesture he picked up from her, and she laughs. She isn't sure what it means to him, but it amuses her that he probably intends something sarcastic. That it's her fault he's tired, perhaps? That he doesn't know what she expects him to do? Does she think he'll sleep during the day when he should be working to ensure their survival? Still grinning, she stops inspecting him. sure that he's in better shape than she is. The juice is starting to wear off, and she wishes they had a way to make it more portable. Maybe she can find another container in the wreckage. Even something small would be sufficient. Kai says something, and she looks up. He's pointing up, his face pinched as he tries to see. She follows his gaze and realizes a ship is coming down to the surface. It's one of hers. He realizes it too. Glancing at her, he takes a step back. Surela Kosha. She wonders if that's the word for home. Kai. She isn't sure what else there is to say. The ship is Reverian. He isn't. This is very simple. He is a Vermilion, her enemy. And now, he's her prisoner. He looks at her. His hand slips down to his knife, but he doesn't pull it out. Surela? She feels her throat lock up. How do people treat prisoners? It isn't something she's ever had to ponder. It was her job to shoot, so she shot. And ships either blew up, crashed if they were in a planet's pull, or they were disabled, floating in space until boarding parties loaded those aboard into detainment shuttles and sent them on their way. On their way to where? Where will they send Kai? Surela? She hears the sound of metal sliding on leather. He's pulled his knife from the sheath. She turns, and his eyes are black and empty for a moment, as if he could really do it, could bring his knife, which he has raised so high, down, and into her flesh. She can't move for a moment, stops breathing, and just waits. It's only fair, really. She stabbed him first. She meets his eyes and sees them change, the darkness in them giving way to something sad and hurt and unsure. Then he smiles. A frightened and slightly apologetic smile. She inhales. The hot air feels good suddenly. The dust against her face feels good too. She doesn't want to die. That fact surprises her. Maybe it's just that she doesn't want to die at his hands. He sighs and looks up at the ship. His expression is one of grim resignation. He mimes a sign for captive, his hands held in front of him as if tied. She shakes her head. No, I go. You stay. She makes a sign for hiding, which is stupid because there's nowhere to hide here. If she hurries back to the site, she can beat the ship down. She can say she was the only survivor. She turns to go. Surela, he says, and she turns. Water. He has learned the word from her. And he's right. She'll need one of the bottles to keep her story up. He tries to hand her the spare, but she shakes her head. He'll need it more. Looking up, she sees the ship is in slow descent. The winds must be making it hard to stay level. And of course there's no need for it to hurry. She imagines her people expect to find only bodies and wreckage. She wonders if Kai's people are also on their way. He turns his knife, holds it carefully by the blade, offering it to her. Pa, Surela. She's about to refuse it, but something in his eyes tells her she shouldn't. She pulls her own knife out and hands it to him. It has no stories. It has no past. Nothing but your blood. He doesn't seem to want her to try to act out what she said, just nods and sticks the weapon in his sheath. The knife is a little too big and sticks out more than it should, but he smiles as if it's a perfect fit. Dene, Surela. She shoves his knife down into her sheath where it fits with room to spare. She touches the gold tracings before looking up at him. Goodbye, Kai. He holds his hand out to her, and she takes it. Her burned palm protests as he claps her hand tightly, but she doesn't try to pull away. He says something with many words, and in a voice so soft she can barely make out the tone. Then he lets go of her hand and lopes off into the burning desert, away from the camp. He'll be fine. She mustn't worry. He's been the one who kept them alive. He'll be fine. She turns and walks back to camp as fast as her hurt ankle will let her. She has enough time to hide any evidence of Kai, to make it look like she's used all the blankets, to be sitting on the pile of them, watching as any lingering footprints disappear from the green sand. The rush of air the ship is bringing up as it lands is finishing what the wind started. Kai will be fine. He's a survivor. She mustn't worry about him. Her people are here. She can go home. Or at least be with her own kind and talk and laugh and probably cry a little. Isn't that what she wanted? The ship is landing, and she recognizes the type. A search and salvage shuttle. They'll be here for a while. She will just have to make sure they don't head toward Kai in the watering hole. He'll have no blankets at night. How will he stay warm? He'll find a way. And it's immaterial now, as the door opens and an officer who outranks her twice over steps out. He looks startled to see her. She forces herself to her feet and stands at attention. Lieutenant Sorella Nackleth, sir. Her posture is perfect, her salute regulation, her voice that of the well-trained soldier. She is Dwalin, after all. They're known for their soldiering skills. Loyal, brave, cognizant of their duty. She would never let a prisoner escape. She'd never give succor to the enemy. Captain Roger. He gives her a pleased look. At ease, Lieutenant. We didn't expect to find anyone alive. I'm the only one, sir. She manages to put everything that means into her voice. Sorrow, guilt, loneliness, fear. He walks closer to her and wrinkles his nose. He's Dwalin too, the epitome of fastidious. There's a shower in the ship, Lieutenant. Go use it. Yes, sir. She doesn't want to go. She wants to stay and make sure they don't find any trace of Kai. Now, Lieutenant. She heads to the ship where another officer is stepping out. As she passes her, she sees her make a face at the smell. Nackleth, Roger says. Sir? She turns, afraid he'll hold up some personal item of Kai's. He isn't holding up anything, he's merely staring at her, a strange look on his face. You buried their dead too? They were starting to smell, sir. He nods. That's easy to understand. Sorella turns back and tries to give the other officer a wide berth. Shower? The woman smiles. Come on, I'll take you. I'm Commander Trebelli. Leading her down the hallway, she takes Sorella past the other crew working to make the shuttle ready for liftoff, past the salvage crew gearing up to take anything of use from what is left of the two ships. You must have been through hell, Lieutenant. Yes, sir. Well, you're back among the living now. Trebelli smiles again, the expression true and generous. Sorella is touched. Her people, her language, her life, all back. Thank you, sir. Trebelli looks out toward the grave Sorella filled with Kai's help. All those people dead, and you had to bury them? With a broken arm? Sorella nods. I was in shock. I believe that. The woman's expression clears, and she goes to a storage cabinet and pulls out a pair of coveralls. Not an officer's uniform, but it will have to do. Go get cleaned up and then ask someone to take you to the mess. Thank you, sir. She waits for Trebelli to walk away, then ducks into the shower. Dialing for cool water, she lets it hit her body for a long time before using the cleanser to scrub the dirt off. The water as it drains is green, and she scrubs harder, working at her skin until the water finally runs clear. Then she turns off the shower and gets out, staring at herself in the mirror. Her skin is darker, burned brownish red from the harsh sun. Her nose is red and her lips chapped. There are dark circles under her eyes, and her skin is so dry that she looks older. Much older. Finding some lotion in the bathroom, she spreads it on, but then hears a yell from outside and feels a shiver go down her spine. They didn't find Kai, they couldn't have. He stayed away, surely. She pulls on the coveralls, not bothering to comb her hair as she rushes out. There's no sign of Kai. Only a few of the salvage crew, whooping over something they found in the Vermilion wreckage. Trebelli looks at her curiously as she stands in the entrance, and Sorella realizes she started to shake. Go get some food and sit down before you fall down, Lieutenant. That's an order. Sorella turns back into the ship, finds her uniform, and shoves it into a refuse chute. She buckles the knife around her waist. Let them ask her about the dagger. She'll say she needed a replacement for her own, and one of the dead Vermilions was wearing this one. It was pretty and very sharp. It was only efficient to take it. And greedy, they'll think she's a little greedy to have stolen it from one of the enemy dead. But greed's allowed when it is also efficient. She isn't so sure they'd understand her saving a Vermilion from the grave. Or from them. Even though that, too, was efficient. He was her only chance for survival. And later, she owed him her life. She doubts they'll care. She wouldn't in their position. So she won't tell them. They can all rest easy. She with her secret, they with their ignorance. Sorella sits in the back of the shuttle and watches as the surface gets smaller and smaller. They've been on the moon. She was right, it was only a moon. For barely more than a day. The salvage team was quick, and there was little to take back. They dock with the larger ship, the captain's true command. She sees the numbers on it. Reverians don't name their ships as she knows Vermilions do. Roger invites her to the bridge, and she stands behind his chair as they start to pull away from the moon, ready to make their way across the wasteland. Trebelli is the pilot, which surprises Sorella for some reason, and she frowns slightly, watching something in the screen at her station. "Incoming ship," she finally says. The ensign at Tactical confirms. "It's Vermilion. Kai's ride home has arrived." Roger leans forward. "Ready weapons." "Weapons ready," the ensign says. Sorella walks over to him, watches as he does exactly what she did. "Sucker shot," she says under her breath. "The enemy is charging weapons, sir." She can see it all over again. Her ship will shoot and they'll miss. Then the Vermilion will shoot and they'll miss too. And then, while they try to reconfigure their sensors to compensate for the interference, they'll drift dangerously close. The shots, when they come, will be too much, the damage too heavy. They'll crash. They'll die. She thinks she should just head for the auxiliary station now, belt herself in and wait to see if she can survive a second crash from her padded cell. Trebelli looks over at her. "Just like old times?" Her grin is sympathetic. She's told Sorella that she's been approved for leave as soon as they make it back to Reverian-controlled space. Probably didn't want Sorella to see combat this soon after trauma. "Just like old times," Sorella says. The ships will collide, and all these people, these fellow Reverians who are just trying to fight the best war they can, will die. And so will all those Vermilions. She leans over the tactical officer and begins to compensate for the interference. "What are you doing?" he asks. "Giving us all a chance," she mutters as she looks over at Roger. "Fire?" she asks, knowing she's completely out of line taking over this way. "Fire," Roger says, obviously not caring any more than Sorella does about protocol. But then, he and Trebelli have heard her story of what happened on that other ship. Her shot strafes along the side of the Vermilion ship. They fire back but miss by a wide margin. "Interference," Sorella says, and hears the ensign make a sound of understanding. She compensates again, her fingers working fast enough that she thinks the younger man can't follow what she is doing. "Fire," she tells him. He fires. The shots strafe the other side. She thinks the damage looks worse than it is, but she hopes that the tactical officer won't realize that. He doesn't. "Good shot." She laughs softly. "Lucky shot." Turning to the captain, she says, "Still too much interference to get a good shot, sir. I'll try again." "No need," he says, pointing to the screen with a disappointed look. Kai's ride is running away. "Shall we pursue?" Trebelli asks. "No, let's go home." Roger looks over at her. "Is that the right answer, Lieutenant?" She tries to smile. She should be eager to go home. "Sir, yes, sir." She watches the Vermilion ship disappear. "Do you think they'll be back?" "Why would they? They must know we got everything of value off the planet." The captain is already programming something into a data module, probably a report of the encounter. She wonders how he'll write up her role. "There's nothing on the planet they'll want." She doesn't argue, and is overcome with tiredness. Trebelli looks over at the lieutenant at comms and says softly, "Why don't you show Lieutenant Nacklith to guest quarters?" He gets up and leads her through the ship to the habitat area. Her room is small, but she doesn't mind. It's hers, and she can be alone. The way Kai is alone now. Alone with all the dead. His and hers. The Reverian dead weren't worth salvaging. It's a pragmatic thing, they were buried after all. Never mind that they lay one on top of the other, or that strange green dirt filled their noses and mouths and eyes. They've left their dead behind. She doesn't think the Vermilions will do that. Any people that carve stories on their knife handles will go back for their dead. Maybe they'll wait until they're sure it's safe, until they fix the damage she did to their ship, but they'll go back. They'll go back, and Kai will be safe. It's a fantasy. She knows that. But it's the only one she has to hold on to. The little skiff bucks in the harsh atmosphere of the moon. Sorella knew when she rented it that it would be a handful, but she took it because the owner was one of the few people interested in loaning his ship out for a joyride to the wasteland. She holds onto the controls and is jerked a bit from side to side. Her arm barely twinges at the motion. The medics did have to re-brake it. The sound was just as bad as that time on Dwala. The pain reminded her of Kai. The ship finally touches down near their camp, and she rushes out, yelling for him. He's not there. She checks the camp and sees that the blanket she hid for him when Reger and the others weren't looking is spread out in their sleeping area. He was here. He must have made his way back as soon as the Reverian shuttle took off. Did he sense his ship up there in the sky beyond his ability to see? Did he know that she saved and doomed him both? Kai! She screams it, then breathes in too deeply, her mouth filling with that green dust she hoped never to see again. She forces herself to breathe shallowly. There's no answer. She walks to the waterhole, afraid that she'll find him dead. He isn't there. She walks to the place where they found the succulents. He's not there either. She tries using the scanner on the skiff, but the dust and winds block anything more than a few meters away. Night falls, and she beds down in the skiff. She has to believe his ship came for him. Even if the Vermilion dead are still in their grave, his ship came for him. She can't find Kai because he isn't here. He's home. Safe. Happy. She sleeps fitfully, waking at each change of the wind, thinking it's him. She can't stay here long. Her leave is short. She has a new assignment, tactical officer on Reger's ship. He was impressed with her, and the ensign was due to transfer off. When morning comes, she walks back to their watering hole, digs down and dunks her hands in the rapidly retreating water. She closes her eyes and tries to block out the sun and the wind and the harsh loneliness that fills her. Kai wasn't her life. Kai was her enemy. They were thrown together by circumstance. They looked out for each other, that was all. She saved him because she owed him, not because she was his friend. Not because she liked him. He's the enemy. Pushing herself to her feet, she walks slowly back to the camp. Kai will know that she was worried about him. Kai will know that she'd come back to look for him. She doesn't know why she believes that, but it's a certainty. An in-her-gut knowledge that won't be denied. Kai will know she's come back for him. She takes his knife and a piece of material from the inside of his ship. It is soft enough to score, and she carves the number of her ship into it. Then she pins the message through the blanket and to the ground with his dagger. With a last look around, she smiles. This part of her life is over. It's time to rejoin the living. Time to rejoin her own people. Time to rejoin the war. She flies the little skiff back, barely making it into the docking ring before the engines give out. The owner yells at her about damage and green dust and wearing delicate systems down, but she pays him and leaves, ignoring his whining as if he was speaking for Mayan. She reports to the ship the next day and settles into a routine that seems strangely easy. Life on that moon was hard. She can't turn on a water faucet without thinking about digging for water. She eats the meals in the mess with far more gusto than anyone else, remembering when plant pulp was the only delicacy to look forward to. And she talks to her crewmates in ways she never did when she and Justina traveled in that other ship. People are precious. Communion is precious. Life is precious. Which doesn't stop her from taking it. War doesn't end just because she thinks life is precious. After she destroys a Vermayan warship, the first thing she does when she gets off duty is throw up. Over and over and over again. The second thing she does is cry. What if that was Kai's ship? In time, she doesn't get sick or cry any longer. She has to believe he's okay. She's off duty and walking with Trebelli to the habitat area when a courier drops a package in her hands. She shrugs at Trebelli's look, but is unwilling to open it in front of her because, while the package is addressed to her, her name is spelled strangely, as if by someone who's sounded it out. Trebelli smiles knowingly and leaves her alone, and Sorella locks the door and unwraps the package with shaking hands. It's her knife, and wrapped around it is a piece of paper with the name Morascan on it. She looks it up in the database. It's not one of the ships that's been obliterated by the Reverian fleet. She knows from memory which Vermayan ships she's destroyed. There's something else written under the name of the ship, in a careful hand, in a strange, stilted form of Dwalin, as if he looked each word up in the dictionary and laid them out according to Vermayan logic. Kai had written, "The war lasts not forever. Meet when over on World of Green." She smiles. They will meet on the dusty green moon when this is over, and she'll take a Vermayan Dwalin dictionary with her. Now all she has to do is stay alive until then. She feels sorry for the Vermayans that come up against her ship. She feels just as sorry for any of the Reverian fleet who take on the Morascan. Both she and Kai have something to fight for. Not a cause, not something abstract. They have something to fight for that actually makes sense. She smiles. Once again, he's found a way to ensure their survival. She soaks the paper in her sink until it disintegrates. There must be no record. Picking up her knife and pulling the sheath out of the closet, she slides the dagger home and buckles the holder around her waist. It looks right there, and her hand goes down to touch it for comfort before she goes to join the others in the mess. Trebelli eyes her knife as she walks up. "Is that what was in the package?" Sorella nods. She told her that she lost the Vermayan one on leave. Trebelli didn't question it, and was sympathetic at her loss of such a fine trophy. "Not as special as your last one." "Not as pretty." Sorella touches the black handle gently. "But still special."
And that concludes our story. Survival stories show us what happens to people when they are stripped of everything. Suddenly nothing matters. Not race, not clan, not affiliation, not language. Once everything that you think defines you is erased, the only thing left is trust. Because if you can't trust the person you're stuck with, then you might as well dig your own grave right now. There's probably a lesson to be learned here, especially in today's tumultuous times, but it's kind of hard to manufacture the removal of all these identifying traits. For example, a friend told me that since she had dealt with cancer, little everyday things that would ruin her day before seemed not to bother her anymore. She'd dealt with cancer. She could deal with anything. I told her I wanted that mentality, only without the cancer. But it's not that easy. Escape Pod is a production of Escape Artists Incorporated and is released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives License. We rely on the generous donations of our listeners. If you enjoyed our story this week, consider going to escapepod.org or patreon.com/EAPodcasts. Our music is by permission of Daikaiju. You can find more about them at daikaiju.org. Our closing quote is from George MacDonald. "To be trusted is a greater compliment than being loved." Thanks for listening. Have fun, and be mighty. We'll see you next week.